Hello. I decided to break out of our typical pre-roll cycle this episode because it's our last show of the year. And I just want to say thank you to you, the listener. We worked very hard to put light pollution news up, to deliver content that you find important, interesting, and impactful. Just so you're aware, there's only 3 of us here that work on light pollution news. Obviously myself, but also like to thank Caitlin for her tremendous lift that she puts forth in handling all of our communications, including social media. I'd also like to thank Caden for the hours of consuming and editing down these shows that he does to get it to be the very best he can. Light pollution news literally takes countless hours each month to put together. We research the news. We go and grab all of the news. There's a whole bunch of revisions and understanding that has to go on to bring these articles to light. We find and bring on guests. That's a little bit of a challenge sometimes too. And obviously we try and make this show a quality listening experience for you. And I want to say it's gotten better over time. And hopefully you can agree with me on that. So without further ado, I want to again thank you, the listener, for the support this year. I hope we can continue to grow the show in 2025. There's a lot more I'd like to do. So let's jump right into the last show of the year. Thank you once more. Light pollution news, December 2024. Say light pollution. In this episode, China launches their version of Starlink, but how dim will it be? Hint, you're not going to like the answer to that. 2 communities push for more responsible lighting practices. And could you tell space junk apart from a meteor? We finish up 2024 with Dr. Travis Longcore and author Paul Bogard. Here we go. Light pollution news is next. Welcome to another Light Pollution News. Today we're closing out 2024. Let me reintroduce you at home to our guest for December, an adjunct professor and co-chair of the Environmental Science and Engineering program at UCLA's Institute of the Environment and Sustainability, Mr. Travis Longcore, and from Hamline University up in the Land O'Lakes, author of many books that you may be familiar with, Mr. Paul Bogard. Paul, we didn't really get a chance to talk too much about the work you've done and stuff that you have coming up in the first half, so let's get into it now. I know most listeners will know exactly who you are. I'm sure they've read your prose at many points or just one point in their life. Who knows? Your book, End of Night, was really important to me personally. It was a catalyst for this podcast. It kind of woke me up in 2020, whereby as we all experienced the slowdown of the pandemic, I found myself with time to rethink my priorities. And it was then that I dove back into astronomy and subsequently learned about light pollution from a completely different angle than I was first exposed to it. Between the 2 of you, Travis and Paul, quickly realized that this wasn't just a blight of simple amateur astronomer, more of a true environmental and cultural crisis. So a little late to the game, yes, but I guess better late than never. So first, on behalf of others who you had moved to care, thank you, Paul. Really appreciate it. So, hey, let's get into what you're working on.
Well, thank you very much. A pleasure to be here. And that's one of the joys of having the End of Night, is just hearing from people for whom it's meant something. And I still get pictures from people who find it in like national parks and gift shops and that kind of thing. And it's just great to know that it's out there in the world. And people should know that Travis and I go way back. That I remember before I even had the contract for the End of Night, looking at Travis, I think I'm allowed to say this. I had like a unpublished manuscript or something like that.
Somebody bootlegged you a copy.
Exactly. And just thinking, like you were just saying, Bill, I often say to people, like, I started with the stars, but you very quickly move beyond that. And when you start to look at light pollution and all, yes, it's, a problem for astronomy, but it's a problem for all of us. And ecology is a huge part of it. And honestly, the piece that motivates me the most is trying to raise awareness of the impact of light on our fellow creatures. So I love the work that Travis does. It's super important and want to try to amplify those subjects where I can. And to get all the way back to your original question, really great news is that I signed a contract for a new book within the last couple months. It's called How to See the Sky. And the subtitle is The Newest Science, The Oldest Questions, and Why They Matter for Life. And so it's that, like The End of Night, like The Ground Beneath Us, like other things I've written, it's a real blend of science and the humanities and really thinking about why does this stuff matter to us? Why should we care about wildlife being impacted by light at night? This book will include the night sky, certainly, but I'm really focused on expanding to think about the 24/7 sky and looking at dawn and dusk and daylight, and also subjects like clouds and wind and weather and satellites and, bird radar, things that kind of amazingly, just in the decades since The End of Night came out, there have been these dramatic developments, like a boatload of study, of course, and then the bird migration, nocturnal bird migration, the use of radar to track that. We talked about that last time. Obviously, the tsunami of LEDs everywhere. Just a lot has happened in the last decade. So I have stuff to write about there, but I'm focused on, the 24/7 sky and really excited. This book is going to found a great publisher at Harper One, which is a imprint of HarperCollins, and they're super excited about it, which is, for any writer, would feel good about that. And so I'm going back to people like Travis and saying, all right, like, catch me up on what's been happening. And I've done some travel. I'll do some more travel in the coming months. And then October 1st deadline, it sounds funny to say, but it's looming for me already. So I've got a lot of work to do between now and then.
How fast does it take you to turn around a manuscript?
My experience has been with my 3 major books that they give you a year once you sell the contract to write the book. With The End of Night, I benefited from, people say, like, how long did it take you to write your first book? And it's like, well, all my life in some ways, right? You have all that time kind of building up to that originally one. And then I think, you've heard about the problem with sophomore, I won't say slump, but a sophomore effort kind of. I think my book, The Ground Beneath Us, which I love and I think in some ways is stronger than The End of Night, but it suffered from only having a year to really write it. I'm excited about this new book because in some ways with the night stuff, I've been working on that, as you guys know, for years, of course. But even the new material, the new subjects, I've been doing research on that for more than a year just to write the book proposal. So I've got a real good head start. The writing, it'll be a good 6 months of drafting and revising, and then turning it in and probably doing some more revising after that. So
always revising, right?
It's the name of the game. We were talking about first-year students, freshmen, 19-year-olds. I teach them every day, and they don't believe it. They think you just sit down and you write something and you turn it in and you're done. And it's like, man, revision is the name. That's where it gets good.
Well, both of you guys are here, so I can't miss this opportunity just to ask, Paul, you've written so much on the culture of night, so much on culture in general, and then you have Travis over here who has written so much on the science of night. What's your feeling? What's the state of light pollution, the state of this issue in 2024?
Well, look, I think, my feeling or understanding about it is that in some ways we've made a lot of progress. I remember, again, researching The End of Night 10 years ago. I talked to people who were active in raising awareness, and they would tell me, 5 or 10 years ago, I would say the phrase light pollution and people didn't know what I was talking about. They hadn't heard those 2 words together. And I think that's changed quite a bit. I think people much more know the phrase light pollution. They've heard about it. They have some sense of it. So that's good. There's just a general awareness of the issue. There are more dark sky areas, for example, officially designated areas. The National Park Service is on board, and they've done, I think, a lot of great work. There are more groups, like here in the Twin Cities, we have a group called Starry Skies North that I helped start, but has really blooms beyond, my actions with it, I guess. We have more of those kinds of groups, and obviously more science. We know more about the impacts of artificial light at night, which is great. And at the same time, as somebody once said to me, almost nowhere is getting darker and almost everywhere is getting brighter, right? So we have that dynamic as well, which is also true. So good and bad. And I would say, I'm just thinking of this kind of on the bad category. We have a whole generation or a couple generations now of people growing up in the US who have no idea what they're missing, have never or rarely seen the Milky Way, have never or rarely been out in under a natural night sky in a natural night. And it makes it in some ways harder to, as you both probably know, like rally support or attention or interest in this when people are just like, why should I care? What are you talking about?
Yeah, Paul, we just got back from Tennessee, and my cousin down there, who is quite a number of years older than me, she grew up in Southern Florida, right? And it was definitely not a dark area, like the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area. In her house, oddly enough, she keeps the light on outside because she has never adapted to being in a dark area, which her part of Tennessee is relatively, it's not dark, but there's not many street lights and stuff like that out there. But then you look at her house and it's the darkest one of the whole list of houses here. And she leaves the light on outside because she's not comfortable with night. And it's not impacting nearly as much as her neighbors. So you make an excellent point on the learned culture, I guess, of nighttime.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I talk to my students about, your education, as it were, isn't just in your classes, the 4 or 5 courses you're taking each semester. It's like, what is the food you're eating? Who are the people that you're meeting? And part of it is, what is the night that you're experiencing? I mean, that's part of your education too. And they're the message that they get, unless they run into me or a few other people, is, night is scary and dangerous. Darkness is where bad things happen. Some light is good, some more light is better. Just all those messages that we know about, and it's really tough to fight against that. I mean, since I started writing about this, I've been amazed by the reality that you can talk. And I don't know if Travis has had this experience too, but you can talk to an audience for 45 minutes about the beauty of the night sky and the costs of light pollution and all the things that we talk about, and somebody will raise their hand and be like, yeah, but no, we need all this light for safety and security. It's like they don't even hear what you're saying because that's all they can think about. So that is certainly a reality for us now.
Happens all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's a sad commentary.
Yeah. Just to follow up, on the science side, and I think, Paul's right here, we do have this enormous growth in research. And I used to be able to kind of keep my arms around what was going on, and I can't anymore. And part of the result of that growth is that there's a lot of people just sort of thinking about the science side, and then as it goes into the professional societies and regulation, partly there's newcomers to the field now who don't necessarily know some of the mistakes that you could avoid. Like, if you're going to do this work, you need a light meter or something that can measure down below 1/10 of a lux, or at least, if you want to measure biologically relevant light. So you have people out there who are like, they're joining the field, but don't have that necessarily knowledge. Then there's the people who are joining and kind of feel like they need to paper over and invent it themselves, and that happens. And I think it happens in disciplines all the time, or they're in a slightly related discipline and they completely ignore the stuff in this area that we've done before. And so they're like, oh, I have this really, completely inexplicable result. It's like, yeah, but if you knew any ecology, you'd know that that's why that species is behaving that way. So there's this kind of growth, but, knowledge hasn't permeated across all of the areas where that growth is happening, which is an interesting thing for me because as we discussed, I'm a geographer. I'm not a chronobiologist. I'm not a physicist. I'm not an astronomer. I'm not, I'm an integrator across space. And so I'm trying to keep track of these things going on and seeing both how there's reinforcing research, but maybe that isn't talking to the other research that it needs to be talking to. And the other thing that's going on that I'm starting to see is the industry the lighting industry and lighting engineers are now going out and giving presentations about the effects of light on wildlife and what wildlife friendly lighting is and whatnot. And on the one hand, it's like, great, everybody's interested. On the other hand, there's a sort of a co-option going on that the industry recognizes that if I can sell this as this, then I'm going to be able to sell more lights. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're not right in what they're presenting. And sometimes they're using various mitigation approaches as get out of jail free card when they shouldn't be. And so it's a perilous time. And sometimes I feel like I have to be kind of a truth cop in these committees that I'm dealing with, IES, CIE, these sort of places where these conversations are happening, where we're having the important people, conversations in the sense of the people are all in the room that need to be there. But it's the power of industry in driving lighting decisions cannot be or overestimated, whichever the right way to say that is. And so you have some parts of and I've worked with a lot of people in industry saying, can you please, provide this kind of product, lower color temperature that can do this or that or the other thing. And yes, you should be available because I'm going to be recommending it on the mitigation side. But we can't do the mitigation unless the industry is there to provide the tools. So there's a lot of good collaboration that goes on, but I sense also that there's a lot of people now out there talking about things that they really don't have the full background to be doing. And that's a challenge for all of us who are, trying to keep us honest.
Jay, Travis, who wags the tail? Is it the consumer? Is it municipalities? Or is it who is the industry responding to?
You can generate a market for better lighting products through regulation. So the fact that Florida you can't install lights on the coast that have emissions less than 560 nanometers, that drives availability. There are some companies that have figured out that there is a marketing opportunity to being the ones who can do star-friendly or wildlife-friendly lighting. And in that sense, they are innovating and they're going out and sometimes creating the market with the municipalities. And then there's the sort of the cultural leadership that comes from places like the National Park Service. So let's note that their involvement was not late. They were doing this back in, I think even 2000s. National Skies Division was there doing their work. They were innovating very early on this and sort of demonstrating impacts and showing how to do better lighting at really culturally important places in the national park system and showing that it can be done. So in that sense, that it's developing through the government action is developing also a consumer demand for better lighting. So I think that there's a mix of things, but there's also, you cannot ignore the magnitude of marketing dollars and influence that is in the outdoor lighting industry and the opportunity to sell more lights or sell controls. And if you can harness that to do better lighting, great. But that isn't always what happens because there is not complete knowledge. And there is still a lot of people out there who are they're selling lights. They're not selling good lighting. They're selling lights. And there's a difference between the two.
I've always thought, and I've tried to throw this out there, I've absolutely no influence on any of this stuff. So I'm going to throw it here. If you have something, just brand something as neighborhood friendly or neighbor friendly, I think that would be hugely beneficial at a Lowe's for consumer level, and then hugely beneficial having neighbor friendly streetlights instead of the godforsaken LEDs that every city's putting up. And just to put that in perspective, we just had and I don't know why every city doesn't do this because it doesn't look like it's very expensive. We just had shielding put in on a streetlight and it's phenomenal. It does exactly what you're supposed to have in a streetlight. It keeps the light out of where it's supposed to be and keeps it where it's supposed to be.
So part of the challenge there is, well, there's a number of different challenges, right? Sometimes you have a municipality that actually owns their lights. Other times you have jurisdictions where there's a basically a monopoly, a utility, an investor-owned utility that comes in and does the lights. And they make their own business decisions. So, like, for example, Southern California Edison here has made the business decision that they're not going to provide streetlights that are less than 3,000 Kelvin. Now, is that the worst? No. Is it the best? Far from it. Right? But they've made that business decision. And there's a lot of lighting specification that goes on that's just sort of meeting the standard, not giving a lot of thought, meeting the standard of illumination on the roadway, RPA, IES, comply with that, blah, 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 and not giving a lot of thought to the spill issues and the using the backside shield, the cul-de-sac shield, the front side shield, all of these things that exist, but somebody has to actually advocate for them to be put in and used appropriately. And I know people in the industry who are working on sort of automated machine learning approaches to this, so that the lighting engineer isn't just sitting there specking out light after light after light after light, but you specify where the light should be, what standards need to be where, and then you let a automated system tell you which lamps and shields get you where you need to be, but not beyond, right? Because there's no penalty right now, essentially, except for the absolutely tiny extra energy use. There's no penalty unless there's an endangered species and there's a whole regulatory process. There's really no penalty for light spill off roadway lighting, right? Municipalities and jurisdictions tend to exempt themselves from their own light pollution regulations in that regard. And what's the downside? The downside comes when people complain, and there's a political thing to how this can go. So, for example, Salt Lake City did what they thought was the right thing and started replacing their old high-pressure sodium with high color temperature LEDs. And they got political pushback on that. And you call them godforsaken LEDs. I wouldn't do that. I would I would be very specific about it's not the LED technology that was your problem necessarily, although there are people who are opposed to LED technology for other reasons, having to do with flicker and migraines and whatnot.
No, I agree with you directly on that. I just want to throw in real fast because I'm not against LEDs, not at all.
Yeah.
I'm against the installation process. It appears to me as a mindless installation process. I'm sure it's not. I'm sure there's a lot of factors there. And you mentioned some of the constraints as the measurement constraints issues. But one of the things I will say, all the stories that come through of people and communities rebelling against streetlights is because they're over 3,000 Kelvin. That's usually what we see.
And
people don't want
and they're not
cold
properly
lights.
shielded.
Yeah.
And they're not properly shielded. Yeah. So Salt Lake City went back and did an entire planning process, community involvement, meetings, experts, disclosure. I was the ecology and sort of human health, consultant, and came up with a new streetlight plan that looks at environmentally sensitive areas and says, we're going to do lower than 2,700 Kelvin there. It's going to be 22 or lower. And that residential neighborhoods, the default's going to be 27, giving people some choice, some ownership, some ability, and also fixing some of the inequalities where there were areas that were definitely underlit from a safety perspective, and they were in poorer areas of town. And so it was very clearly oriented toward, let's get the light where it needs to be in the appropriate places. And the other critical piece is the controls that LEDs allow you to have, that the industry has been promising for a decade and a half, that we actually use to dim in and do it in an experimental way. Go out with the community once your lights are in and say, how is this? This is half power. Is everybody happy with this? And the ability to do that, right? And for the downtown, lights up when the bars, close, if they have bars in Salt Lake, not too many. Or after a better example, when the basketball game gets out or whatever, lights up full and then put them back down to a quarter power, for 2 to 5 in the morning when there's just not that use. So actually letting the industry and technology live up to its potential in a way that saves energy, reduces environmental impacts, reduces, all these adverse things that we can come along.
Yeah, I was going to say that it reminds me of spending time with the folks designing the lighting in Paris when I was writing The End of Night, and their excitement about LEDs because they could, they said first we did studies of the whole city to figure out where people really are at night, where they're active and what's happening. And then they were going to try to do exactly what Travis says, which is, sometimes you want a little more light, sometimes you want a little less light, and with LEDs, I just always say, great promise, but potentially also great peril too. It could just mean, and I think it has meant in too many places, just more light, than we've had. And one note, I like, Bill, what you said about, the emphasis on neighborly lighting. Lowe's actually did have a good neighbor, quote unquote, line of lights. I don't know if they still do, but 10 years ago or 7 or 8 years ago, they did. We could talk all about, are we living in a country of neighborliness right now or not? But I like to think about like light trespass, for example, where you have light from one property trespassing into another property. And if you can I always feel like if you could just get people to be aware of that, like, how is that? How do we allow that? That's just crazy, And yet everywhere in America, with, some exceptions, that is just the way it is.
Yeah, definitely, Paul. Maybe the light trespass is the source of the unneighborliness. We're not getting enough sleep. Well, I think we did a good warm up there. So I'm actually going to pass over our warm up article here and jump right into the news. This is some good news in astronomy. So we have construction is actually going to be ending on a Vera Rubin Observatory down in Chile. And the plan is to switch on next year. The telescope has a camera resolution of 3,200 megapixels. To put that in perspective, most of your consumer grade DSLR cameras sit somewhere between a 20 to 100 megapixel range. So it's a lot of megapixels. The operators plan to chart the night sky with upwards of 1,000 photos at night. That's good news, but they will have some competition for that piece of sky they're looking at. And I know we've talked quite extensively about satellites over the past few months, but hey, they're in the news and the space race has been renewed, but this time it's really the space economy race. Last month, we recounted stories of the AST Bluebirds, and a month before, we had a story on the new Starlink cellular communication satellites. Well, over in China, they sent up the initial round of 18 of the Qifan communication satellites to build, wait for it, a mega constellation to rival Starlink. Similar to AST and Starlink, these satellites are projected to be bright, very bright. In a study yet to be released, researchers are estimating that the satellites will be upwards of 4th magnitude at zenith while fading to a dim 8th magnitude on the horizons. And what the hell, since we're talking about bright things in the sky, new startup Robinhood co-founder Baju Bhatt has created a startup called Aetherflux, in which looks to beam infrared light down to stations below in an effort to renew energy sources, potentially for remote areas off of the grid. And they plan to start launching their test satellites in 2025. So some of this can't be a good thing for Vera Rubin Observatory. The observatory has been nearly 10 years in the making, has included backers like Bill Gates, the U.S. National Science Foundation, and the U.S. Department of Energy. Paul, when I hit satellite stories, which are becoming kind of storyline from month to month, I can't help but wonder about the curiosity and connection that you write about in the night sky. And specifically, so I want to throw this your way because you wrote in a time before satellites were very apparent in the night sky. If you're that kid today, what would he write about going forward as satellites become the norm in the night sky?
Man, we could talk about this for a whole nother session. I actually wrote a piece for the New York Times a few months ago that they ended up not printing, in part because they said there was already so many stories about satellites, and kind of, it was sort of, and their attitude was a little bit like, everybody knows about it. And I was like, I don't really think so, but it's your newspaper. Yeah. I mean, part of what I said in that essay was that, when I was 5 years old, I'll never forget seeing a satellite, cross the sky at our northern Minnesota cabin. It was, it is one of my first memories. And it was a memory of wonder, like seeing that satellite go across and just imagining that, human beings had placed that light in the sky among the stars was really beautiful. It was really moving, and for most of my life, I think that's been, when I've seen satellites, everybody says, "Oh, there's a satellite." It's an exciting thing. But now I think of, my own 5-year-old who's now 6, and I just think, everybody I've talked to about this is just really concerned about it and what the future holds and how it's going to change our experience, which is already so mitigated, but our experience of the night sky. And I just don't even, what's it going to be like for my daughter when she's our ages, it's super troubling. And I don't think it's a thing that people know about. I don't think people understand the numbers that we're talking about of, going from wherever we are, 9,000 satellites to 90,000 or 150 or whatever the, crazy numbers are, what that's going to be like. And yeah, it's very troubling from a cultural experience standpoint. It's very troubling to me.
I think to your point, most people really wouldn't know it anyway. If you're in a more light polluted area, higher Bortle number, you're going to see less satellites, right? And which the astounding part is I can still see satellites here in Bortle, probably Bortle 9, Bortle 8, borderline. We kind of moved up over the last year. But when you go to a lower Bortle, which most people don't live in and they don't ever look up, but they'll look up when they go to, say, national park, and they'll see much of the sky moving versus here, they might see one or two things because you can only see 50 things on a given night.
I think that's true. And Travis may have a better understanding of this than I do. But, I know you've talked to John Barentine, and what John has told me, one of the really troubling things is when the satellites are going to be most evident to people looking at the sky is like in the evening, basically, if people do look at the sky, that's when they're going to see them. People aren't up at most people aren't up at 2 a.m. when they won't be as much of a problem kind of thing. So,
yeah. Well, since we're here and, I know many of you at home have listened or have seen Perseids, and I guess today you guys have probably looked for some meteor showers in your life. Did you ever wonder if that shooting star was actually a meteorite or a piece of space junk? So here's a quick little test that you can use from Dr. Ellie Samsoon. Per ABC News in Australia, it's 5 to 6 seconds long. It's probably a fireball. If it's minutes long and you're able to get your phone out, more likely space debris. And I had a chance to actually see one of these live at one of the star parties I went to. It looked like a shooting star cascade across the sky for about 20 seconds, appeared to skim and brighten randomly and kind of blow up periodically along the way. So maybe that's the new world reality we're looking at. In the news also this month, we did have one upbeat story regarding the space economy. The Australian Space Agency solicited for submissions on how to incorporate First Nation cultural and scientific knowledge in their space sector, which includes potential protection for viewing the night sky. The Australian night sky is projected to be impacted quite negatively from brightening of the night sky due to low Earth orbit satellites. So a couple of these stories came in regarding growth and regional development, and I'm curious to your take on these. First, down in Gippsland, New Zealand, located in what's locally called the Valley of the Vines. Gippsland is notable to folks around the world for their award-winning wines that derive from the Central Otago wine region. The residents who are part of the Friends of the Gippsland Character Zone have decidedly railed against new government plan to install a new community inside the confines. The Gippsland Village project plans to bring in 900 houses, 2.4 hectares of commercial facilities, and a school. This comes as the general Queenstown area experiences what looks to be unprecedented fast-track development that the opposition claims to have bypassed a typical community input and community feedback loop. Other proposed developments in the region share similar goals of sizable population growth. Included in there also is an expansion of mining operations, hospitals, and more. And a new development would increase the population over fivefold. Opposition is gravely concerned about the loss of their new international park dark sky designation. The developer plans to make concessions for light pollution to retain the designation. At the time of this recording, the Queenstown Council has yet to review the proposal. And then we also have this story from across the pond in the UK. It all started when residents living adjacent to the Lees Nature Reserve in the South Shields section of South Tyneside, UK, noticed new 32-foot-high light poles being erected. The residents vocally opposed the new lighting, organized themselves, and put together a Change.org petition that garnered over 1,000 signatures. The project, which was initiated by local leaders of the South Shields, apparently also failed to notify the National Trust, an organization that helps maintain the Lees. From a high level, the plan appears to be a very sensible one. Modernize a cycling path adjacent to a roadway, which includes protections for bikers. Thanks in part to pushback from the community, South Shields is looking to implement a more responsible practice for streetlights, including shielding and warmer temperatures than they initially planned. The catalyst for this was because the neighbors had revolted due to an objection over being able to see the natural night and their northern lights from their property. So we have two cases where communities are pushing back against some government planning that may impart some negative consequences on their skies. But is this really a case of communities that just don't want to change? Or do they actually have valid concerns? What do you guys think on this?
Well, I mean, look, one of these is, a complete housing development within a community.
It's a whole community.
Yeah. And that's the lens of light pollution is probably not fair. Like the other one, the bike lane issue, I think that's a mismatch between the desires and the technology. Now, first of all, I'm not sure why everything has to be lit. I biked everywhere when I lived in Europe, in the winter, in Sweden, at night. It was never a problem. We had lights on our bikes. That was that. And so there's a lot of, I know there's advocates out there who think that everything needs to be lit, but maybe everything doesn't need to be lit. However, if you're going to do something like that, and there's sensitivity, either aesthetic or ecological or astronomical, that there's much better solutions than 30-foot tall poles. That is almost guaranteed, depending on the development pattern, that you're going to be bugging somebody. And there's been enormous advances and demonstrations now in Germany. Paper came out not too long ago. Super cool, showing how you can shield lights, custom shield lights. And they developed this with a lighting manufacturer to get light on a trail, but not on a nearby creek. And they were able to demonstrate this really dramatic decrease in insect attraction by using basically the best technology for shielding that you could. But 30-foot poles is suggesting that you are trying to cover a bigger area than maybe is feasible to do a good balance. So there, I think it's appropriate. And they did mention that they were going to go for warmer color temperatures. And from the generic insect impact, that's appropriate, although it doesn't resolve issues like fireflies, bioluminescent organisms that are seeing in those warmer color temperature areas of the spectrum.
Yeah, and I mean, we should come back in 6 months and see what decisions were made. Laws and policies are almost always geared toward development, and obviously our economies are geared toward growth. And I just have a hard time believing that light pollution concerns about lighting are going to get in the way, stop that kind of development. At the same time, I'm glad people are thinking about it. At least that may be a positive aspect to this story.
Yeah, and it's enough to the point that they're thinking about it as with a new community coming in, trying to instill some best practices right out of the gate, which is pretty impressive, right? So I want to get back to you real fast, Travis, on the bike thing, because I bike commute a lot, and I would say two things on that. In the areas that are brightest, I feel less safe now, because before I could stand out because I had light, and now I kind of blend in because it's so bright. The area is saturated, it's all a flat white essentially. So you don't feel like there's anything that catches anyone's eye. But then the other side is bike lights are astoundingly brighter than they used to be. They are essentially like car headlights. Yeah. And, you don't need it. We had Jennifer Huygen on last year, and she was petitioning her council to install lights in a park. And she's a cycling worker, and she does all of her things, and she understood, I have bike lights and whatnot, but she just felt that it was unsafe for women to go in areas that were dark. And I think that is something that needs to be really driven through and understood here, because I think that's a valid concern.
It's very culturally distinct. There are other places around the world where everybody does this. Everybody bikes at night. Everybody uses it. And no, you don't need to have a laser on the front of your bike as a light. And, it's just, it's a cultural decision.
Yeah, good points. All right. First study, we're going to go to the health side, speed up things a little bit here. First study of the International Journal of Health Research. Through using satellite imagery, there was a significant correlation between artificial light at night and low birth weight. There were also 2 really good summary pieces that I'm mentioning in the event someone wants to check these out. One from WebMD, which does a fantastic job summarizing the state of research in simple, readable English as it pertains to health and light pollution. Another one from the Asia Journal of Environment and Ecology, which does much the same, but in a much more technical and detailed manner. Before we leave this health segment, this kind of ties in with the health news. It's really a tech story, but I don't know if either of you have iPhones or if you update your iPhones. iOS 18 is going to be coming out. iOS 18 has an automatic setting now for your screen icons that can go into dark mode, which essentially removes some of the residual white light on your screen. And there's also an additional pro tip. If you aren't aware of how to turn your iPhone screen red when in a nighttime environment, you can definitely look that up. But once you do that, you're able to add a shortcut to your pull-down screen for the functionality under the color filters menu. So pretty neat stuff there. All right. I want to give you guys a chance to plug yourselves one last time. Let's start with Paul. Paul, you got a new book coming out. People should look for it in 2026, I'm presuming.
Yeah, that's the plan. A new book coming out, but it's, due October 1st, and then it typically takes about 9 months before it comes out after that. So what would that be? Summer of 2026, something like that.
And what's the name of it again?
Well, these things can always change along the way, but right now it's How to See the Sky, the newest science, the oldest questions, and why they matter for life. And, I'm the main goal, I guess, or the driving theme here is, how do I get people, we were just talking about iPhones, how do we get people from, looking down at their phone to looking up at the sky? And the idea obviously behind the How to See the Sky is that, people think they see the sky, but they really don't. And so here are ways to see it, practices to see it, lots of new information about what you're seeing. And I think it's good. It would be good for our lives to be reconnected with that part of the natural world.
Where can people learn more about the upcoming book, or where is the best spot for people to find all about you?
Yeah, I have a website that's paul-bogard.com. People can go and find the latest news and pictures and that kind of thing. And if people are interested to contact me, that's a good place to do it as well.
Okay, great. Travis, any big projects coming up that you want to talk about or not talk about? That's fine. Still under wraps right now.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of a different environment. It doesn't matter if I plug or not, right? I mean, the people who are going to see their work, they're going to see it. I have a project with Caltrans that we're starting sort of a second phase. Those you follow know I did a big report for them on LEDs and terrestrial wildlife, and we're going to head more into the implementation side with them and trying to really get some of these workflows so that the lighting engineers and the biologists have a language to talk to each other, and we can actually get the balancing of the safety with the wildlife impacts into the process at the design phase. It's always harder when you get to, something's installed and it's a problem. It's always better to get it earlier on. And so we're trying to do that. And, California being California, hopefully it can be something that other states look to and spills over. And we got a few other projects going on. I don't just do light pollution, so got some work happening, but just keeping at it, teaching a few students and trying to keep my salary funded.
Where would somebody reach out if they're looking to just touch base with you?
They can find me at travislongcore.net, no hyphen, so just travislongcore.net, or it's a unique enough name that you just need one Google search and you can find me.
Let's round out the show this month. The next guy is one that's is interesting. If you guys haven't heard about this, I'm not sure if either of you guys are really focused on the sphere like I have focused on the sphere. But hey, it's in the news again. Second location. It's not going to be in London. The Sphere Abu Dhabi will bring its innovative, immersive experience, along with all the light pollution one could ever dream about, to the United Arab Emirates capital city. From initial details, it appears that Abu Dhabi will be forking part of the bill, and the Sphere itself, in case you're wondering, closes fiscal year back in June, which incurred a sizable loss for facilities-related depreciation costs. It should be noted that the Sphere went into operation in October 2023, therefore it didn't have a full revenue stream for a few months of the year. Down in Dripping Springs, Texas, located in Hill Country to the west of Austin, the Hayes County Friends of the Night Sky awarded 13 area businesses with a Be a Star award. These businesses instituted responsible lighting practices that both served to make patrons feel safe and protected the local environment. Dripping Springs became the first Texas city to become a dark sky community way back in 2014. And in designations this month, I want to welcome Saudi Arabia's Al Lola, which earned an International Dark Sky Park certification. And we missed welcoming Kalkura into the fold back in September. Not sure how that happened, but hey, let's cheer on all the folks that have helped create a new dark sky sanctuary down New Zealand. Paul, I think this one falls in line with what you may have written about quite a while back. The travel site Skyscanner believes that 2025 will be the year of astro-tourism. This is driven by the huge year we had in astronomy-related tourism in 2024. Per Skyscanner, the April eclipse topped Google for travel-related search terms. Overall, Skyscanner found that 54% of participants in the poll were interested in catching the northern lights. 37% were interested in watching an eclipse, regardless of solar or lunar, apparently. And 37% were interested in going to an observatory. Paul, in your book, The End of Night, I felt that you were very early on in illustrating some of the emotional connection of astro-tourism. And it felt like astro-tourism was kind of like just a very new thing at that time. Here we have it. We have astro-tourism starting to really rise up and to very impactful economic levels.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's definitely positives to that. You know, communities that are recognizing that they have something that people want to come see, therefore maybe trying to protect it a little bit more, you know, because they can hopefully make money from it. So that's really great. I think you mentioned the eclipse. I mean, I think, you know, for me, just the power of the sky still remains. Like the madness that happens when eclipse was going to happen, or, you know, I think about a text I got from a friend of mine who said, you know, the Northern Lights are predicted tonight and everybody's losing their shit, you know, just kind of that sense of like, just excitement about these experiences that we have with the sky is something that I think is a hopeful thing and a good thing. You know, at the same time, the fact that there is something called astrotourism kind of speaks to our situation, which is that most people live in places where they can't see the stars, more or less, you know, and what's the great costs of that you have to, that if you want to see the Milky Way or you want to see a real night sky, that you have to, you know, spend money and go. And, you know, then we get into issues of like, who can afford to go to see the sky and that kind of thing. So it is a good thing. I think it reflects our ongoing curiosity about and wonder with the night sky, which is a great thing. But it also kind of reflects the state of our lives these days.
It's something. Yeah, I always wonder about that class divide, how that's going to play out. Hopefully we can find a way to get more people to be able to experience a natural night. I also want to add that the publication believes that young folks are seeking out the stars. We're very interested in astrology. Now, I don't know if that's simply the author confusing astronomy with astrology, which astoundingly is not unheard of in articles I read, but to add credence to the homage to the ancient form of mysticism. The article determined that 74% of those who supposedly fit a Gen Z age group believe that astrology will determine their next trip. Well, I can surely tell you that the stars haven't guided my life around here in Philly, because I can only see on a good night maybe about 50 of them. However, I do want to thank you, Travis, and you, Paul. Been really a great panel. This is great to have you guys here. I feel honored that you guys took a couple hours out of your life just to come on and talk today. and learned so much. And I know that listener at home was able to take away so much. So thank you guys. Thank you for your time, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you for the show. It's a great show.
And before we go, I just want to have since this is the last official episode of 2024, I want to thank all of my guests from 2024 who weren't on today's show, but had come through, including Diane Turnshek, Karim Ashfurugla, Astro Backyards, Ashley Northcote, Lauren Colley, Tim Brothers, Tara Roberts Zabriskie, Mary Stewart Adams, John Barentine, Danny Robertson, Isa Muhammad, Frank Torino, Betty Meyerfoot, Jeff Bueller, Matthias Schmidt, the Actual Astronomy Podcast, Shane Luca, Jack Ellerby, Yano Yukishina, David Smith, Leah Osborne, Josh Dury, Ken Walczek, The Stars and Nights, Betty Buckley, Leo Smith, Shalana Da Silva, Tyler Norgren, Nancy Clanton, Nebula Photos, Nico Carver, Cape May Astros, Kevin Bear, and Michael Reimer. Thank you again to my guests today and throughout all of 2024. Thank you at home for once more staying with us and continuing to help spread the word about the show and helping to, hopefully the show is making a difference in your life. So as a reminder, Light Pollution News is recorded towards the end of each month. This month we recorded the show on November 16th. You can find all the details related to today's show over at lightpollutionnews.com. If you have any thoughts or questions, just want to say hi, feel free to simply text us via the link in the show notes or email us, bill@lightpollutionnews.com. Signing off for last time 2024. I'm your host, Bill McKinney. Thanking you for listening, and remember to shine the light only where it's needed. Okay, this is a really easy one. A question of the month for you guys. What was your favorite moment? Why don't you share with us your favorite moment of 2024? You can shoot that over any which way you feel like doing. You want to email it over to us, bill@lightpollutionnews.com, or you can text us via the text link, or really any which way. If you want to hit us up on social media, that's fine too. And then we'll throw it in a newsletter and show it here on one of our social media channels. All right.